Hey guys, this is season one, episode one of Trigger Warning for SA and Indoctrination by Parents. And otherwise, enjoy the episode.
All right. So, welcome to House of the Owl Star.
Again.
Yeah, again. I've got Ben and Tony with me. We're doing a round table this time. And we're discussing Ben's story, and Tony and I, of course, will share some of ours along the way as well. Ben shared his story last night. I was grateful to have him come and share his story here with us today. So, okay,
Hey.
Ben. So you're
So I'm 45 years old. I've been in North Carolina about 20 years. Before that, grew up in Indiana and Michigan. But before that, the earliest years of my life, my parents, both of my parents were in the Army before I was born. And they were stationed in different places. They were already married, but they were stationed at different posts. So consequently, my mom knows the exact date and location of my conception, and would, take the opportunity every year around Columbus Day to remind me of it, as if I didn't already know that I existed. But sometimes she would bake a cake and sing happy birthday. And it was years before I understood, why she was doing that, probably about the same time I was learning about, how long it takes a baby to gestate and things like that, to put two and two together. My birthday's not till July. But and then, as an adult, she would call me and sing happy birthday, and then I'd stopped answering the phone. And so eventually she figured out if she texted me, and just kept texting me, eventually I would respond to it. But she knew, I think, at least that I was reading it, so she got it in. She does the same thing with the Ides of March, by the way. Like when I was a kid, I was into Shakespeare. And so we have this contest every year, like basically to see who can be the first to call the other and say, beware the Ides of March. And usually it's her. Usually I forget completely and she gets me. But like the last couple of years, I've gotten to drop on her because I'll call her at like 5 o'clock in the morning as I'm getting ready for work. But I mean, so, I've said that over and over again that, my mom kind of fucked me up. But I mean, there were good times in there too, a lot of good times. And that's kind of what I was talking about the other night, is that, I spent so much of my life, my teenage years, like I started rebelling pretty much as soon as I hit puberty, but like all those teenage years, early adulthood on into middle adulthood, right up until, within the last couple of years, I blamed mom for everything. Every bad choice I ever made, I blamed mom for. If it was something that I even thought my mother would think was a good idea, I'd do exactly the opposite, because fuck that, like without any sort of rational plan to it or anything like that. If it sounded like mom, I was going the other way, because even if it was something completely sensible that a sane person would do, it my teeth are fucked up because my parents spent thousands of dollars on straightening my teeth, and my mom was constantly on me about brushing my teeth and keeping my braces and stuff clean. And eventually I just said, fuck it, and stopped taking care of myself, and a lot of that's got to do with depression and things like that. But a lot of it has to do with her as well, but there again, like I said, I have been learning here in the last couple of years that, just because all of those things happened, mom was psychologically and emotionally abusive, but that doesn't, it doesn't take away my responsibility for my own life and the choices that I've made, because I've made a mess of it. And that's all on me. But
well, that's what I was going to ask about was when you were saying that she was doing those things, a lot of people probably would take that as that, your mom loved you a lot and wanted to give you 2 birthdays a year or whatever, but there was some oddities involved with telling stories in public in front of other people. And
she
just doing, a lot of other things that had to do with, and you feel free to share or not share what you want.
Right.
I'm just saying that you're saying there's some mental health issues that you said she wasn't dealing with, and what, or
well, she well, I'll say this: she came from a very abusive upbringing, very, very abusive. And that was a lot of physical abuse. And I don't want to go into like too much detail about who did what or anything like that, but it was a lot of physical abuse. And I remember her telling me several times, my childhood, she talked about what we now think of as breaking the cycle of addiction. How she didn't want to raise me the way that she was raised, but not realizing that she was doing those things, but in her own way.
Right.
She does have some pretty serious mental health challenges. But at the
also
time,
got some generational trauma that she was
definitely
doing her best to not pass on.
She was, but I mean, she did anyway. But like I said, rural Indiana in the 1980s, there was a lot of stigma on mental health issues, and not a whole lot of access or even knowing how to go about those kind of things. And that trickled over to me as well. I was saying earlier that, my dad and I had a conversation, in my adult years, about what was going on with me as a child. And he said basically that my parents knew there was something wrong. They knew that there were things that were happening to me or things that I was doing that needed to be dealt with, that they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle those things or how to approach them. Mom's solution to that was to shove me in a room with our pastor, like once or twice a month for quote unquote counseling. I mean, and I knew, knowing our pastor and things like, it's not his job to be a therapist or things like that. And he obviously didn't want to do it. I don't know how in the world she talked him into it, but so yeah, I mean, she didn't have any kind of diagnosis or medication until years later. And even that, how with mental health diagnoses and medications, there's a lot of dialing in periods of adjustment where, we're going to put you, see how you do on this medication for a while. And it may be a couple of years before they say, okay, maybe that's not working so great. Let's try this instead. And there was years and years of that for her, But I mean, where it relates to me is that, like I said, for years and years, almost my entire adult life, I blamed her. I was vocal about it. I told her exactly, what I thought about her in no uncertain terms. At one point, I told her that I was, and this is, I don't know, the height of arrogance, in my opinion. I told her that I was the consequence of all her choices. Like I was the sum total of everything that she had ever done in her life.
Wow.
And this was when I was off the deep end and drugs and alcohol and living that fucking rock star lifestyle that I lived, after my marriage split up. But I don't know, in some ways, I think I may have been the cause of my parents' divorce. Things that my dad and I talked about. I told him one time, I said, I had this feeling, this sense that most of the fights you guys had when I was growing up were about me. And I said, but that can't be true. That's got to be just my perception of it. And he said, no. He's like, that's absolutely true. He said probably 90% of the arguments and fights we had were over you. And I think the thing is that she grew up in such a disciplinarian environment, and Dad was so laid back that she felt that he wasn't handling it right. So like she had to step in and be the disciplinarian and be in charge of all those things. But it didn't work out that great. But I mean, it didn't really change who he was. You know, he's still pretty laid back.
Well, so you guys went, you guys were in Indiana, but you had mentioned when we thought we were recording before that you had moved up to Alaska.
Yeah. I think 81. Dad had a choice of overseas duty, and it was pretty much mandatory that he have overseas duty at that point. I'm not sure why, but I mean that's what he always told me. But his choices were Germany, Panama, or Alaska. And of course, you know, I think anybody would say that nobody wanted to go to Panama in 1981. I think there was some pretty rough things going on down there about that time, or in that time period. And he didn't want to go to Germany. So, and he'd always wanted to go to Alaska. So I guess that was the perfect choice for him. I went to kindergarten in Alaska. I remember one time, Dad was an MP for a while. One time there was a moose. There was a bull moose on the playground at school. They had to evacuate the whole school. I mean, it was a small elementary school, but a few hundred people all had to like evacuate the whole school, go across the street while the MPs chase this moose off of the playground. I mean, most people have never seen like a full-grown bull moose.
These things are huge.
In person. I mean, you're talking over 7 feet at the shoulder.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't count the height of the head and the rack of antlers. I got chased by one time. That's a very, very scary memory. Yeah, like I just like, and this is me 5 years old. Like we lived in these long buildings that were like townhouses or enlisted housing, but there were, you know, 3 floors, the main floor, upstairs, and a basement, in like townhouse type of situation. So I'm walking around the end of the building, and there's this bull moose just standing right there, and I just froze, and and this is weird because I still have nightmares about this, you know, 40 years later. But like I was just standing there staring at this thing, and it looks down at me, and it just does this, like, you know, like it was like it wasn't running at me, but it was like it was ready to, you know. And I just took off running and like ran around the building and back inside. Nobody saw it, and the wild thing was that nobody believed me. Like, because they went and looked for this moose when I told my parents that like it wasn't there. So like it happened. I mean, I know it happened, but if you guys remember like the show Northern Exposure,
yeah,
like how the moose is just like walking through town, you know, that is really like that. Like that was Fort Richardson in Alaska, which I'm not great with geography, but I believe that's a little ways north of Anchorage. I could be totally wrong on that. Like, and I'm horrible at remembering things like that. But
we'll
Fairbanks,
forgive you. You're in
town.
Kindergarten.
Yeah, I was in kindergarten. I was in kindergarten. That's true.
Yeah.
But it was nice in Alaska, wasn't it?
I mean,
you go fishing, any salmon?
I don't remember going fishing at all. I remember we took a train to Seward, Alaska one time. Which I do remember being on the train. It was cool because like it's on the side of a mountain, these train tracks. You just look out the window and it's like 300-foot drop into the ocean or the bay or whatever. And like there was a picture of it in the old family photo albums of these. You could see out into the water, and there were these little white humps sticking up out of the water. They're beluga whales. But Seward is like at the time it was like a tourist trap, sort of Wild West kind of town. where everything was like themed, and people would go and I remember the picture was like of me and my sister and two of our friends dressed up in these like sort of cowboyish prospector outfits that our parents got us, sort of
Saloony
tacky shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
In a way,
saloon,
yeah.
like
It was like an old
1800s.
West frontier
Yeah.
town kind of theme. Um, I remember the mall that we would go to. Like when you walked into the front entrance of the mall, there was a grizzly bear that was like, I think it was like a record holding grizzly bear for the size that somebody had shot in the area, and it was stuffed and mounted, like standing up with its front legs up over its head like this, and it was probably 15 feet tall. I mean, these are 40-year-old memories of a 5-year-old, but
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, I would guess it was enormous.
Yeah.
It was huge. But I remember Dad telling me it was some kind of record holder, and I've heard from people since then that have told me that was still there. I don't know if that's true or not. Just things you hear over the years. It could have been taken down by now, or it might still be there. Hell, the whole mall might be gone by now. Excuse me. Well, let's see. I was 5, almost 6 when Dad got out of the military, and we moved from Alaska to Indiana. And one thing I really remember about that is when we flew from Anchorage to Seattle. It is literally the only time in my life I've ever been on a commercial airline.
Wow.
I've never been on a big airplane since. I've been on one little tiny airplane once or twice since then. But and then we drove from Seattle to northern Indiana, southern Michigan, in a Volkswagen Beetle, all the way across the northern states.
And that's you, your mom, your dad.
Me, mom and dad, me, and my oldest sister. I'm the firstborn, but my oldest sister is 2 years younger than me.
Okay.
The four of us, yeah. I remember the Badlands, and I remember having a stiff neck the whole time from falling asleep in Volkswagen.
All right.
Yeah.
In the back seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dad grew up in southern Michigan. Mom grew up in Elkhart, Indiana, and the house they bought was in a little tiny town called Howe, which was about halfway in between Mom's family and Dad's family, basically. Tiny town, like one stoplight. Only claim to fame was there was a small private military school in that town, which my parents, I'm sure, thought about sending me to many, many times.
So yeah, and speaking of that, like what kind of stuff were you like? Were you being unruly in school? Were you starting to
no, my general unruliness was
alcohol at the same time?
Was a little stranger than that, I think. Maybe not as typical as it is for other kids. And it was always, I mean, in class, I got in trouble a lot for like drawing pictures, instead of paying attention to what was going on in the classroom in elementary school. Outside of school, we did a lot of shit that we weren't supposed to. I didn't really get into any drugs or anything, but I got myself into situations that turned out badly for me. I was said several times by older kids. They're probably in the late 80s. I would guess I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And there was a lot of behaviors that I exhibited during those times that any parent now would look at that and say, yeah, something's going on to this kid with his kid. Somebody's abusing this kid. At the time, I don't think anybody knew how to pick up on things like that. Like I was the kid that had a really strange bad habit of exposing himself to the girls in the neighborhood. like
Okay.
things like that, like just out of nowhere. And I remember doing this, like I just like whip it out, start peeing in front of everybody, like blatantly, like all the girls in the neighborhood, all my sister's friends. I don't know why. I kind of tend to feel like there was probably some sexual abuse that went on before my like conscious memory began. And I've talked to my parents about that, but like they were at a loss to even conceive of who it might have been in my life at that point. So there was no like investigating or trying to figure out who it could. I mean, it doesn't really matter, like I know who it was, the older kids that messed with me when I was a kid, but I blocked that out for years. Like I repressed that memory for years. It wasn't until I was in high school that I like had this sudden, and I don't know what triggered it, but I just suddenly started remembering all these things that had happened when I was like 7 or 8. And I'm just like, I had a hard time even deciding for myself if it was an actual memory or if there was something going, like why am I having all these, like, did this really happen to me? But I did go to my parents and talk to them about it. But the kid in question, he and his family had moved out of the area at that point. And that was when I first learned that, kids who do things like that, it's generally because somebody else is doing that to them,
Yeah.
So my parents were immediately concerned. I didn't understand at the time, like, what the fuck, you're worried about that kid? And they're like, well, you got to understand, if he did that to you, then somebody's probably doing that to him,
and then if you're not the only one he's doing it to, then
I probably wasn't. And that's probably
why they picked up and moved.
Yeah, that's probably why they moved. There were a lot of other things that I did that, like, some of the things I'm proud of, like we had this after like this summer program where these college kids or high school kids would come in and like at the school playground, and this was during the summertime, and they would do like different activities and crafts and stuff with us, I guess, just for something for us to do to keep us out of trouble, I guess. And one time I like the two girls that were leading the program, and like I said, I was kind of proud of this, but I kind of feel bad about it at the same time, because like they were being really shitty to us and threatening to tell our parents we were doing all these things that we weren't even doing. So like I basically led a rebellion. Like I got all these kids to basically take off from where we were supposed to be on the playground, and like we went in the woods and the cornfields for like the entire day while our parents are out looking for us and shit like that. And like just so like
freaking the teachers and the whole town.
Oh yeah. I got a lot of trouble for that one, but I mean, yeah, we did a lot of shit. Like, well, I told you there was a military school there. So my best friend growing up, his dad worked for the military school, and they were from Great Britain, which was really wild in a town like that, like people from Great Britain. But like we went to school together. His dad was a teacher at the school. He taught English, but he was also the priest at the Episcopal church that was attached to the school. I mean, but he was like the most foul-mouthed, beer-swilling British guy you ever met in your life. Like, really straight. Like, he told me one time that you know what an anagram is, right? Like when two words like have exactly the same letters in them, but you rearrange the letters. He was the one that told me that Episcopal is an anagram for Pepsi Cola. Like, it's the same letters.
Wow.
So yeah, me and my friend Owen, like we would get dressed up in either camouflage fatigues or the military school sweats, which were like maroon and gray. And we would run around the military school campus in all the off limits places that were off limits for the cadets, and get the staff chasing us all over the campus because they thought we were cadets. And then they would catch us and he'd say, "Excuse me, I'm Father Morgan's son." And like they're like, oh, okay. And we're untouchable. I mean, we could do anything we wanted on that campus. It was hilarious. Unless the cadets were around, and then like we were targets. because we were like the privileged kids who didn't have to go to the military school, and they were pretty much, I mean, it was like a prison camp, because all those kids that went to that school, like their parents had money, but they were kids that got themselves in a lot of trouble. So like, they were there because they had to be there, and some of them, I mean, basically would spend their entire time there doing anything they could do to get kicked out, stealing, beating up on other kids,
right.
what have you, anything they could do to get kicked out. So yeah, one of them stole my bicycle one time. Like my dumb ass, I rode my bicycle to school and then walked home and forgot it. And we lived like a block and a half from the elementary school, so it's not like it was that far, but by the time I remembered it was gone. It literally, that kid stole my bike just because he was trying to get kicked out of the military school.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, okay. So when did you start to, find out about drinking and or using? And
Dad smoked pot throughout my childhood. I mean, he hardly ever drank. It was a big problem between him and Mom. Like, she's very much conservative Christian. She grew up Catholic, and she hated the fact that he smoked weed. So we grew up with her teaching us that it was evil, and people like that went to hell and all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Dad's doing it out in the barn with a neighbor and his brothers and stuff like that. And so it's confusing. I think I saw him drunk maybe one time my entire childhood. But I didn't start doing anything like drugs until like I was in high school. I was really indoctrinated in the anti-drug thing by my mom and by the school and everything. And I was actually like one of the kids that got sent to like these conferences as a spokesperson for the school, to these anti-drug conference things. Meanwhile, I was big in theater, and I had started taking caffeine pills. You remember no-dos? Like constantly. Like, okay. I drank soda and coffee all the time, but I was taking those constantly just to stay awake, have the energy I needed for school and sports and theater. I was really big into theater, plus a part-time job at a grocery store. And that led into some other things. Like, you guys remember Crosstops? The pharmaceutical speed? They don't even make them anymore.
I remember White Crosses and 357s.
We started taking those, like me and some friends of mine.
They had amphetamines in them.
Yeah, it didn't last very long, and I'm really thankful looking back that it didn't, because the guy that was selling them to us died suddenly in a motorcycle accident.
Oh wow.
And I didn't know anybody else that had anything like that, and I was too terrified of getting caught to even ask. So that kind of died off for me for a few years. And it wasn't until I think I was about 19 years old and I started smoking weed, or the first time I smoked weed. And Dad had quit smoking weed. Like, Mom gave him some kind of ultimatum at some point when I want to say like 12 or 13. And they almost got divorced, but he quit smoking weed. He quit smoking for a while there, and started going to church, which he didn't go to church before that. But I mean, he found Jesus and all that, and and then so happy family, I guess, for a little while. Not really, but that's what mom was always more about appearances than anything else. She wanted everybody to think that we had this happy, perfect family. But he had quit smoking weed. My senior year of high school, a lot of wild, crazy shit happened. Like, my sister and several of her friends all decided to come out of the closet at the same time and tell everybody they were bisexual. And as a consequence, my sister kind of got pegged as the ringleader of the whole thing. So none of her friends were allowed to hang out with her anymore. She went through her own battles and crises over that. My parents, I have two adopted siblings. This is part of it too. Back up a little bit. My parents adopted because they couldn't have children naturally anymore. I have a brother who was born when I was 15, and a sister was born when I was 17. My brother's black. And in that part of the country, in that time, in the county we lived in, there was like one black family in the entire county, very, very much predominantly white, some Hispanic, but hardly any black people. And so it was kind of a unique situation. I mean, it's not entirely unique, but in that area, it was pretty much unheard of. But there was a lot of
so excuse me,
yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt,
no,
but
go ahead.
when he was adopted, how old was he?
He was a week old.
Wow.
Yeah, he was tiny too. He's like 2 months premature. I mean, you literally, like, there's a picture of my dad holding him in one hand, and my dad's thumb was bigger than my brother's leg. I mean,
wow.
He was very, very tiny. He was only like 4 pounds when he was born. Yeah, but he was a week old. My little sister, the youngest, Lainey, she has Down syndrome. She came to us when she was about 9 days old. So yeah, very early, infants. But because of a lot of those things, that we were kind of ostracized in the community. Some of it, I think, because my parents adopted my brother. A lot of it because of my sister and her coming out, so to speak. And my dad was having struggles at work because they kept laying people off, and he worked for Grumman Olson back then, making UPS trucks and shit like that. So he right near the end of the summer after I graduated, he had a job opportunity in Grand Rapids. I went to school in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they're about 3 hours apart, Grand Rapids and Fort Wayne. But so like the week after I left to go to college, they moved. There's this massive sort of uprooting in my life to where, like, I couldn't go back home because my parents didn't live there anymore. We were kind of pariahs in that community anyway. I had burned a lot of bridges on my own with friends, and a girlfriend whose family like hated me, justifiably. I wasn't being a good dude, even then. But yeah, so, and I only lasted like a year in college. I was very depressed, and because the girl had broken up with me, and I felt like I couldn't live without her. I couldn't get over it. It took me years to get over that, but a lot of it was just my sick sort of like codependency more than anything else. It really wasn't her fault. I mean, if it was me, and I would have dumped me too. Like,
right.
Looking back, hindsight seems 2020, but at the time, I didn't want to live. That was kind of the early years of my like struggles with suicidal ideation. Was that it wasn't so much that I wanted to die or I wanted to kill myself because I was too cowardly to do anything like that. I didn't want to live. I didn't care about being alive. Like I could have done so many things. Like, had so much talent and like musical talent and intelligence and things like that. I could have done so many things. I never had like the drive. Like I was so depressed all the time. It was just so much easier to just stay home and play video games. And, I started smoking weed and drinking in my early 20s. The drinking didn't last very long though. I was talking about this the other night. A very pivotal moment in my life. Like, I'm not like a violent person. I never really have been. I've been in my share of fights over the years of my lifetime, but this one incident in particular, I was about 21, and a bunch of friends that we all hung out and drank together and whatnot. Some of us worked together. I drank a lot of Jack Daniels back in the day because I thought it was cool. It tastes like the fucking devil's asshole, but
Oh, man. It was
I never
cool.
liked the taste of it. I never liked the taste of it, but I drank it because I thought it looked cool, you know.
It was cool.
Yeah, no, it's just like I thought I would look tough if I drank Jack Daniels.
I'm a bourbon man myself.
Nobody would fuck with me, right? If they're like, this dude's drinking Jack Daniels, you know, like I don't know. So we're at a pool hall one night, and me and a very good friend of mine, we get into some sort of disagreement like you do when you're drinking liquor and playing pool or anything competitive, and we're in each other's faces, and he grabs a hold of my shirt, and like we're yelling and cussing at each other, and our friends grab us and try to pull us apart. But what they didn't know, and none of us knew at the time, is when he grabbed my shirt, his finger hooked in my nipple ring and my left nipple. And when they pulled us apart, I went one way and the nipple went the other way. Like half of my nipple got basically torn. It didn't get torn off, but like the ring got torn out and like it was just like hanging by. Yeah, it was horrible. I don't remember any of this because I was blackout drunk at the time. And I didn't find out what happened till later. But what happened after that was that I pretty much went apeshit on this kid and beat the shit out of him. To the point where he was unconscious and bloody on the floor, and they're calling the cops and the ambulance, and my friends grabbed me and got me out of there before the cops got there. And the ambulance came and got him, presumably. I don't know because I wasn't there and I don't remember it. But my next memory was waking up on the floor of my apartment. The door's wide open. I'm covered in blood. My nipples hanging off of me like like, you know, like what the fuck just happened, you know? So I started making phone calls, calling my friends, and like, of course, it's early in the morning. Nobody's answering. You know, this is before cell phones. Nobody's answering the phone. They're all either still sleeping it off or at work or whatever, you know. And I even called the police department because I was like, what did I kill somebody? You know, like I felt like if I killed somebody, I'm gonna turn myself in, you know. Stupid maybe, but I mean, I'm that kind of person. You know, like I said, I'm not a violent person. I don't just go out of my way to hurt people. But finally found somebody who knew what was going on, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, you beat the shit out of him. He's in the hospital right now. So like I dropped everything, cleaned myself up, and bandaged myself up as best I could, and went down to the hospital. Stopped in the gift shop on the way to the room, and when he woke up, I was sitting next to the bed with a bouquet of flowers, and it was just kind of looked at each other like, he's like, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? And I'm like, well, like I don't know exactly, but this is what they told me. And you know, we were able to put it behind us, I guess, because I think the biggest reason we were able to put it behind us because neither of us remembered what happened.
Yeah, and you were missing a nipple, so yeah,
and it healed really fucked up. It's still deformed to this day. It looks funny, but I mean, it's not like I have any real use for it. So, but yeah, we were friends for years after that. I don't know where he is now, but you know, somewhere out there, you know, there's a guy that's got the other end of that story. But I used to tell people like after that, you know, like anytime there was like a disagreement or, you know, things got hostile in a bar, I'd be like, you know, anytime you feel froggy, you just go ahead and jump. I said, when you wake up in the hospital, I'll be there with flowers. And my friends would be like, yeah, he'll do that. He's done it before. Yeah, that was, I don't tell that story very often, but I don't know. Anyway, the reason though that I tell that story is, especially in this context, is that I was so mortified by what I had done. I was terrified of the idea that I could do something like that. That I didn't touch a drop for probably close to 10 years after that. Because I avoided it at all costs. I was like one of those alcohol's evil, kind of thing. I spent the next 10 years smoking weed all day, every day.
Mhm.
But, like, it's kind of weird too. Cause like I was afraid to drink. So like when I found weed, it was like I had found a solution, Of course, by the time I was about 30, I weighed like 325 pounds. And my doctor was telling me, if you don't make some changes, you're going to die. That's literally what she told me. But it probably saved my life. But then there again, like I said, I thought weed was the solution. And then when I rediscovered alcohol, I was like, I don't need to smoke weed anymore. I got this, like I somehow thought it was so much better. Like I finally had the answer to all my mental health problems. And it's not like I was doing anything about them really at all. Before that, like I wasn't like in any kind of like mental health treatment or therapy or counseling or medications. Like I used to tell people how like, that I was one of those people that thought that medications like antidepressants and things like that were no good for anybody, and that weed was so much better, because it was natural, it grows in, like still being like the person that I thought I was supposed to be, being a Christian or trying to be a Christian. I always said, well, God made it, this is man-made, so, fuck whatever these doctors think. This is what I'm gonna do, but anyway, I'm talking a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
what?
That's why we're here.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm trying not to be too interruptive because I want to get to the point where
Yeah, it's
talked
also
about
leading
the
up
spiritual
leading
side.
up to all the other
And
shit.
I'll be glad to kick in at any time because I have the ability to share.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just like last time I was hanging out at Jason and over at his family's house, and there was a jet ski out there, and I went there because I was in a bad space. And I was trying to break some kind of mood that I was in. So I went out on a jet ski and was running around on a jet ski, and then somehow the jet ski ended up on top of me and it shattered my femur.
Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning that before.
Yeah. And then, from that it was a long, and I was going to meetings and hanging out with people too. And that's when I was in my mid-30s, my early 30s. So I went on this long I mean, I had a sponsor who let me stay with him for 3 months. And then like at the last month, he went off to Scotland and they had me on Oxycontin and Percocet. And I was trying to come off of that while he was gone. Mm-hmm. And my sponsor at the time was old school, I hate to use this, but fucking Nazi. You know what I'm saying? That's what they used to. They refer to themselves as they book thumpers, and they're thumping the book. You know what I'm saying? I feel like half the time they're not even paying attention to the solution, which is in the book, because of, dude, you talk about earlier, when I was in the 70s and 80s, it was all about the parents. It was not about the children. They used to throw us outside. We had a hose. We would drink outside. You know what I'm saying? And abusive families was the norm, and it was almost considered cool, I guess, because the police would let it go. And nowadays we are living in a time where half the people don't want to admit what they have done, and they're doubling down on it. And there's the other half that are trying to have a better life, and I'm trying to hang out with those people.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just wanted to let you know about the whole, back in the day as a kid, it was just wild. It was all family, and, trying to agree with what you're saying so you can see where I'm going with this. And then So anyway, then getting back to the jet ski thing, I moved in with my sponsor for 3 months and came off the drugs that the doctor had given me. And I mean, it was insane. Went to psych ward, and then as soon as I could walk, I was like, you know, because I knew it was driving him crazy, me being in there and him not being able to tell me what to do. You know who he is.
Oh yeah.
You know, it probably drove him crazy, you know, but he told me he was trying to make amends for some of the things that he had done in his life. Mm-hmm. And honestly, dude, I'm like the best roommate. You know what I'm saying? I pay my bills and all that kind of stuff too. So anyway, I end up moving into the shelter because I was going to start all over again. Because at least as soon as I could defend myself, that was what was in my mind. I was going to go start over. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I you know, and so I went to the shelter. I didn't think about going to a halfway house, you know. I felt like I would be able to get the most help if I went to the shelter and they found out. And that didn't turn out to be true at all. You know, it was a hot mess. So then a friend of mine, somebody that I had helped get sober, I moved in with him in Georgia. And then they end up relapsing and trying to like rob me. You know what I'm saying? And they made up this whole story to the police. And so I went to jail for like 6 months, you know, and I got to see the prison for real. How that they were just using citizens of this country as ways to make money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then I got to get out, and I was like jails, institutions, and death in sobriety. I'm getting drunk, man. Screw this. And I tore that town apart. It was like they left their doors unlocked, and I was drinking and using, and it was just like heaven to me. But ultimately, my disease was self-destructive. I hurt myself. People were like, "You're scary," and I'm like, well, I mean, this is the disease. This is the drinking and the drugs. And so some veterans came up and they put me in a van. They're like, "You're getting in the van one way or another." You know? So they took me to a hospital in Muskogee, Alabama, which was where they trained the Muskogee Airmen. You know, which I was like, that was awesome. And they took care of me, but I was so crazy that they couldn't take care of me. Their facility couldn't deal with me. So they sent me up to a place called Little Rock, Arkansas, and I was there for about a year and a half. And at the VA, and was in the hospital, and then they put me on a job there. But, you know, I kept doing what other people were saying to do. You know, pray, you know, believe in God and all that. And I kept getting drunk, dude. I kept getting drunk. So I got to a point, it's like, listen, if I'm going to die, I'm going to come home to Charlotte, and I'm going to die in Charlotte. That's what I'm going to do. So I came home to Charlotte and got distracted for about a year or two trying to get on my feet. You know, I found some semblance of recovery and some new people. But there was a nagging, there was a group of fucking idiots, morons. Most of the people in the rooms that I ran into, those people had said that I had hurt them, and I hadn't. When I was told you I went to jail, they came back up here, and they have like a nice little group of people, pretty much in a cult, you know, and they were trying to, you know, I don't know, you know, protect the person that had lied. Later on, they admitted that they had lied, and I asked for amends, and they disappeared. Jason got sucked into it too. You know, it was like he got kind of like, because he was hanging out with me, and he had let a loss, and I'm going to stop with that. I'm going to let you want to share about that. You can share about that. And they didn't want him to share about it. And I was like, he can share about whatever the fuck he wants to share about. You know what I'm saying? He can talk about it until the end of time, because that's what we're here for. I do not care. I come to the meetings to find people I can help, and then I go home and I practice my program. And so So I started this little meeting with a couple of young people, and I had just like the greatest spiritual experience, man. It was some of the kids came up to me and like, there's no God. And it never dawned on me before. I'd been searching my whole life, following the paths of all these people and, trying to find that kind of inspiration. And it kept falling me short. And then this atheism stuff started making sense. And then I found it's okay to not know everything. It's okay to feel pain. Now, what am I going to do next? And the program gave me so many tools to deal with the frustration, the doubt, the fear, the pain, helping other people, setting up meetings, taking people through the steps, volunteering, going to the doctor. I found out later on that I wasn't suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, which the military had diagnosed me with, just so they could kick me out the door. I'd come out that I had a traumatic brain injury with vertigo, and Jason saw me crash. He's like, it didn't make any sense. How could you? He saw it. He's like, how's a jet ski land on you? And then I told him about the vertigo, and he's like, holy shit, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And so those personality traits that I was thought were personality traits, they were actually conditions of headaches from migraines, being around a lot of people, being off center, being high up in the air. Vertigo is not a personality trait as like schizophrenia.
Right.
So I found out later on that the problems that I was suffering from was completely different from, and there's a whole fight within the medical community that will not diagnose you with a condition after you've been diagnosed with a condition. It's so embedded, that the patient has nothing to do with his own treatment, it's ridiculous. So again, I want to go back to like, I found out like, the whole spiritual part of the program that helps me find peace. Like I got up this afternoon, and and I called because I wanted to make sure I was here, because I wanted to hear your conception of spirituality that keeps you sober, that thing that brings me peace. I like hearing in other people because I might have missed something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so like I wake up in the morning, or I listen to music. I listen to some heavy music sometimes. Falling in Reverse, I've been listening to them. I've been loving them for a while now. And then I have like a little meditation thing that I use. It's like in the book that we read, there's a part where we're supposed to say like prayers, but I don't do that, because like after the third step, it says, or something like this. Right after the prayer says, or something like this, that means the same.
It does.
And what I found was, what I say is why would I be afraid of the night when I so love the stars? And that covers me wanting to forgive myself, me forgiving other people, me wanting to help, me putting these things aside, so that I can do the next right thing and get on with my life and let go of problems that have no solution other than madness, and try to do the best, because there's no, for me at least, there's no perfect way to do this. It's always progress. And I wanted to hear, that, and I wanted to, let you know, like I was raised in a family, and father was abusive, and the police were cool with it. My mom suffered, and she had her problems too. They did not have the ability to treat people that they have today, and people are fighting against it.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing to me, like how much of like our generation, you know, Gen X is still clinging to that kind of stuff. You know, you see stuff on social media all the time. We grew up getting our asses beaten and we turned out just fine. And kids these days are, you know,
we didn't.
you know, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, you know, I see stuff like that. I'm like, how did we turn out fine? Like, and why does that justify it? Why does that justify beating the shit out of your kids, you know, because they said something you didn't like?
Yeah,
is it not conceivable that, okay, yeah, granted, Gen X, we're fucking awesome, but is it not conceivable that there might just be a better way than the ways that our parents raised us, the methods that they use to discipline us, you know, which a lot of it's just rooted in fundamental Christian culture, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, which, you know, I think has its own merit, but it doesn't have to be a physical rod. You know, obviously kids need structure and discipline, but that doesn't mean you have to beat them within an inch of their life just to get your point across. But yeah, you saying that just kind of like, yeah, there is a whole culture of that. And there is a dichotomy of one part of our culture is trying to move forward and find better ways to do things, and another part of our culture is still stuck in this old methodology that has produced so many garbage results, you know.
I mean, they half the time these people, you know, they don't want to look back and see, well, that's their mother and father that was doing that. Or that was even them that was abusing the other sons, you know, and they don't even realize it goes like, they don't understand, like in the early 1900s, we were not that technology, we weren't that technically advanced but World War II kind of brought everything to this country. You know, the industrialization. The rest of the world couldn't do what we could do because they had bombed each other into pretty much non-existence. And we were able to build an industry in this country because of that.
Excuse me.
And I mean, to say that I'm like perfectly exact on that's not how the world works. It's not black and white. It's multicultural, it's multi-layered, it's multicolor. I mean, so it's always, for me, again, progressive, and I'm hopeful. That is one of the things I'm hopeful because I see like what the kids are doing. They're standing up to their parents and saying, listen, we're not supposed to abuse somebody because they're different. We're allowed to let them be where they're at, and knowing sometimes, in some cases, that person's going to suffer after they make their decision. And we're still here to help. And how they walked away from that, or it might have never been. It might have been just a fantasy story that they told us all. But I'm in the program, and I'm about being helpful, and that's what I try to do. You know, half the time you're surrounded by people that are sick and antisocial, and they're going to lash out no matter what. That's what they've been trained to do since birth. And learning how to let that go, using that as an actual learning tool. To say, listen, I don't need to drink over this person. I don't need to hurt myself or anybody else. You know, they're probably going to get drunk, and I don't really want anybody to suffer like I did. You know, to have that kind of empathy and compassion for other people is spirituality in itself. And I'm an atheist, brother. I ain't even playing. I will, you know, they're like, you need to calm down with that. I'm like, no, you need to calm down with that crap. You know, I'm not walking downtown Charlotte with a freaking sign screaming. You know, I'm living my life to the best of my ability, and I have another advantage. I have a couple of people that love and care about me. They actually love and care about me. You know, after all the things that I've done, I have an advantage. I have people that know me, and it's incredible. And people are like, you shouldn't be talking so much. I'm like, how do you stop someone from sharing that they love, even the sick?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? How do you? So, but anyway, I did bring Jason up a little bit, and I don't know if he wants to share about, but he kind of got sucked into my world because he had some losses. And then so we kind of like started like our own little meeting. And he was trying to heal, and he's still just like everybody trying to do that. But I'm gonna stop because I feel like I'm sharing his stuff. But yeah, he knows me. We've been known each other for like 20
Yeah, you
30
guys have
Yeah.
known each other a
Yeah.
long time.
Long
I know
time.
that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you guys are touching on stuff that really has to do with indoctrination, and our system, and then becoming aware of that stuff. So, Gen X, Generation X are the people who grew up with that indoctrination still pretty rolling, pretty hardcore. And however, people were beginning to start to communicate through computers, the intraweb and emails, and there's so much that you guys just sort of brought up a whole spectrum of a bunch of different stuff. But the technology that our parents grew up with isn't the technology that we grew up with. However, they were going to work with some of that technology, learning it, and then basically in our primes was when the internet occurred, and people started being able to communicate, at least in the short term, was through the internet, like in the country. And so as that started to be built, lots of information started to flood in. And there's something that I learned recently that I didn't know about was, if it had to do with Karl Marx or anything like that, there wasn't any real professors that were allowed to teach. It's like they weren't allowed to teach it, and if they did, they would get fired, period.
And they would use misquotes, and they would make up information.
Right. They would try to, create code talk that would avoid anybody finding anything like that out. And, they would flood you with other information to avoid you from getting that information. And so, when you hear people bring up the patriarchy and all of that stuff, is very, very much real. I happen to be brought up with someone who was in the LGBTQ community in the 60s. And all the way through her life, she was in the closet, but still very much bisexual. And she was an only parent to me. My parents got divorced when I was, actually, from the paperwork, a year and a half old. And my dad didn't pay any child support. And they had some sort of understanding. But she did say that she wanted me to know my dad and his family. And so they were there, and he was in Vietnam, and he had I found his water treatment certificate. He was at Camp Lejeune as a water treatment specialist. And then he went to Okinawa, and he was in Okinawa, and then he was diagnosed, and when he got back, he was back from his duty. There was some complications with his his leave. He later on they fixed it and made it honorary discharge or whatever, but he got into it with the courts and whatnot because he noticed that, you know, a lot of the troops, his, you know, people he was, you know, with, he didn't go out in battle in action, but he was on the island, and a lot of these guys would come back and they would treat the locals badly. They would torture them, not like torture, but they would, well, some of them were torture, but they would run back and forth over the roof of their houses, and they would beat the prostitutes and stuff like that. And my dad got involved with some of that stuff in court. And anyway, he got discharged, and he was home 2 weeks before I was born. But for about 9 months, of Mama's pregnancy, she was in Camp Lejeune. She wasn't in base, but they lived like just outside of the base, like a block away. And then the last month or so, she came back here, and I was born, and Dad was here for that. And then he would start throwing couch around and grabbing us and jumping behind the couch, saying that he saw helicopters and that we were being attacked, and stuff like that early on. And they gave him their first diagnosis of him was bipolar. Bipolar, and then it went to manic depressive, and then finally later on in the 90s it was borderline personality disorder, borderline schizophrenic. And then of course, I mean, that's a whole nother, my dad's story is incredibly interesting, and it could be sad. And he was more like a distant uncle or distant cousin to me. He wasn't really that much of a part of my life, hardly at all. But I did get to see a couple of my uncles beat the shit out of my cousins on a regular basis. They would be watching me, and my mom would be work or out or whatever. And, they beat the daylights out of my cousins right smack in front of me as if I weren't there, or like, they never really like hurt me, strong arm me, but they did my cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was really supportive about it. In other words, when he would drop me off at one of my uncle's houses, that uncle would, I watched him kick my cousin down the stairs, and then once my cousin got down the stairs, he kept beating him, And so, all of those things were extremely traumatic. And then hindsight later on, finding out how, my mom was closet and didn't want to come out because she wanted to protect me from being shunned and disowned by, both of my grandfathers and both of my grandmothers, and just kept it quiet, tells me a lot about how, she carried herself, and she was real adamant about, hating liars and stuff, but she always carried something heavy with her, so she's judging herself in a way that created this, ability to separate myself from everyone. I learned how to not identify with everyone around me. And be extremely lonely and alone. And you mentioned something about codependent, relationships and whatnot. And I believe a lot of us go in that direction with a lot of things. And when we do find, substances, to no fault of our own, we're getting some kind of relief. And that's why the self-medication occurs, and that's why, sometimes it's cheaper and easier to get drugs than it is to, get food or a place over my, a roof over my head or clothes on my back. None of that stuff matters when I can actually get some sort of relief from this isolation in the midst of crowds, this not being able to connect and identify and be a part of people's lives. And then all on top of that has to do with the indoctrination saying, that can all take away as long as you pray or worship something that you can't even you can't physically connect with it, right? Like we all have the association of having a sense of awe and being at peace and calm. And a lot of that time it was other people that were feeling the same way, and I was being accepting of them and they were being accepting of me. And so then therefore, I know from my story had everything to do with, and I didn't know this at the time, right? But I was identifying with them, and then so it was a lot of gimme, but that's all hindsight. At the time, I'm doing everything I can to be of love to that person or people, group of people, whatever it was. And the actions were, projecting all my pain out on them. Eventually the honeymoon phase goes away. And now I see all your faults and your flaws. And like, I have got to beat them out of you or push them away or get away from you. I never beat the crap out of anybody, but I watched other people do it, and it was extremely painful thing. And I'm grateful now with being able to learn about myself and write and look and being able to admit that I'm afraid of people, that I do things out of fear, and that can help me to, as long as I address it, I can do something about it. But if I don't address it, then I'm not even trying to change at that point. And there's a lot of people out there that we run into all the time on the internet and in our daily lives and our family that aren't doing that. They don't want to do that. And there's a story about I can give this to an entity that doesn't exist. A little do people know that has a lot to do with, we can brush this under the rug, sweep this under the rug, and not do anything about it. I'm supposed to just keep forgiving and keep forgiving and keep forgiving and I'm forgiven until the point, where I'm putting my hand in the disposal, and letting it chew my hand up. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. At some point, I get to be around people who, choose wholeheartedly to be accountable and to say, I might be wrong about this, or what can I do to make it better? What, I did mess up. What can I do to make it better? and then listen and be open to hearing what that is. You know, because that's a thing, is like this whole, like, you know, forgiveness and doing the right thing, and, you know, being the right way. And, you know, a lot of people love to preach those, you know, gospels of, you know, doing the right thing and doing the next right thing. And, you know, all of these, they love putting that up. They love standing on the podium. They love standing on the stump and giving their speech. However, rarely do you hear people talking about the community and what actively we're doing with the community, you know, and you don't hear a lot of people talking about, you know, I did this the wrong way, and I needed to learn from other people who were practicing doing it in a way that had to do with accountability. It has to do with staying accountable and being transparent and being as honest as I possibly can. And if that's practicing brutal honesty for a while, just so that I can not lie, you know, or hide from the truth, or do whatever it is that, you know, I'm trying to save my reputation from being like slain and whatnot. Like, it's always got to do with a competition and attack and power, you know, the play of power that motivates people. And I'm not, you know, I ultimately, whatever spirituality that's being practiced for any of us has to do everything with, one, the phrase, I might be wrong. Two, you know, what can I do for my community? Then three has to do with interpersonal, and has to do with offering up change. What can I do? You know, offering up a place of reasoning so that I can hear what that person needs, you know, and that connection starts to happen when we hit those notes, when we hit those points. Those are the things that happen. And those are the higher powers, right? Is those principles of interaction with myself first, and then other people. Like, those powers are the ones that create the spaces for other people to be welcome and to be, you know, all inclusive. That's what happens. And this younger generation is, I mean, what's the newest one that's about to start the workforce and be in the generation Alpha?
Yeah.
So they're in this place of, you know, the millennials are getting, you know, because they're on the other side of the spectrum, which has everything to do with, yeah, all this stuff has meaning. All this stuff has meaning. It's been shared for almost 20 years constantly. Just this massive flow of information about what abuse is, about what, you know, what does some abuses look like. So of course they're going to come into a place of being like, wow, I can't participate in anything because almost everything is abuse. And then you know, the boomer generation and the older Gen X's are, you know, on this like plane of existence that's like, y'all just want to cry and complain about everything. They're still living in that indoctrinated state of mind, you know, unless, in general, of course, in general, there are plenty of, there's plenty of boomers that I know that they do listen, and they do hear, and they do have correction, and they do understand accountability. Not all of them, but some of them.
You give them too much credit.
I'm saying some of them.
Got too much forgiveness in you, man.
I refuse to generalize.
We need to just get them.
But it's true though. Their roots are in there, so their conversations come out like that. You know, and And the Gen X is the people who were like, we're going to play on this stuff. We're going to play on this internet. We're going to talk. We're going to meet people. This is when when I'm in my mid 20s is when people started, super meeting each other and dating from across the globe in other countries. People started meeting each other and dating, and that was like a phenomenon. It's like, no, I get to connect with somebody from across the globe. I get to connect with somebody in Australia.
Yeah, I just had a friend of mine marry a girl from Africa.
It's crazy.
He went over there, hadn't met her, flew her over here. Now I think they're married. They might be getting married. I haven't, but I was so happy for him. I mean, so happy for him.
Congratulations. It's not something I would do, but
right.
Congratulations to him.
He's happy, man. I'm happy for him.
I mean, that's happy as happy.
When I first met him, he was miserable beyond. He was miserable, and he was not, and now he's trying to live his best life, and that's all you do, man. So yeah, you're right. There are people meeting all from this country, meeting all over the world.
That's a completely different way of like living. That is affecting our lives directly on a regular basis now. And so I love it because it brings that part up about connection and being a part of the community, and then being able to call people out or to the carpet, however you want to look at it. You call them in, and say, hey, this is abuse. You get to address it, and then we get to find another way to do. That's how people change, right? That's how people change. This whole idea that people can't change is exactly how things don't change.
That's what keeps people from changing.
Yeah. And so what part of no, I just want to kind of give you a segue as to, where did things sort of go different as well? Like, as far as, having a sense of agnosticism versus your indoctrination into like a hierarchical way of thinking.
Well, I mean, like I said, I was raised in Christianity and the church, and very heavily indoctrinated in that worldview and in that belief system. Even into my late 20s, was very heavily involved in the churches that we went to, or at least that last one, pretty seriously involved with it, in the actual inner workings of the church and leadership and things like that. It's all manner of things that just really disgusted me. The way that people treat each other, and the very serious lack of accountability. We're talking about accountability. And we've talked about this before. Tony and I have, how so much of Christianity, they talk all the time about accountability, and but they're the last people that really want to do it. But I mean, where it broke for me was
because I believe they don't know what it is. They think really. They know what it is, really. But they don't really know what it is.
They just find ways around it, where they want to point the finger back at somebody else, and I've always said that, if I have a problem with you and I confront you with it, and I say, Jason, you did this, and this is what happened as a result, and I think you need to do something about it. And you come back at me and say, well, what about this? You did this, this, and this. That's not the time for that. That's how people get bogged down in that thing, because they want to turn it into tit for tat.
Right.
You're saying this to me about what I'm doing. Well, what about what you're doing? Okay, let's leave that for a separate conversation. Right now we're talking about what Jason did and how it affected the people around him. That's where people lose that accountability, because they want to take the spotlight off of me and put it back on you, because you're just as fucked up as I am. Well, that's all well and good and true. I am just as fucked up as you are, but I think that's where people lose the plot when it comes to accountability, because, nobody likes to be sort of put under the microscope like that.
Well, I think it also has to do with gradients and like nuances, like stealing a candy bar from Walmart is not the same as murdering somebody,
right.
And so
Right.
there's
We're not laughing at when we're talking like this.
No, but because we all know what we're thinking. What we're thinking about is that
well, that essentially, and I'll let you go or let you continue. Is that essentially is what we're talking about? Is it when called to the table, on the side, however, whatever the scenario is, you did this to me, or you did this in this scenario, and it's inappropriate, and then, well, you did this and this and this there's a truth to what they're saying, right? And so, well, I thought I could do it because this or that or something, right? But then, what it all goes into what we're talking about, like what the differences are. And so if we were to take the time to address each issue and how we could offer service, right, from that issue, then we can move forward as a group, as a one-on-one thing. But until we address that, we can't move forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was saying, I was involved in the church pretty heavily. At the same time, my dad and I were collaborating on a book that we were writing, which was a sort of a science fiction, fantasy, future history sort of thing that incorporated a lot of elements of biblical prophecy. And because of that, I was doing a lot of reading and research about the history of the Bible, how it came to be as we know it today. Not only that, but what was left out, the Apocrypha, the Book of Enoch, a lot of things like that, and where all of those things came from. And I read a book called The 12th Planet by Zecharia Sitchin, that really literally just turned everything on its ear for me. Like, it shook the foundation of everything I thought I knew to be true. Everything I'd been taught my entire life crumbled almost overnight because of that book and because of something a comedian said. Which is bizarre because he was talking about Jesus, and he was talking about how, Jesus is basically saying, hey, you guys need to worship me or be destroyed, and I'd never looked at it from that perspective. I'd never looked at the Bible and Jesus Christ and Christianity itself from the viewpoint of somebody who wasn't raised in it. Because when you're raised in it, it just seems like, yeah, this is what it is, of course. And you laugh at people who don't believe because those guys are idiots, don't they realize, but that's all indoctrination. That's all indoctrination. You're indoctrinated into this culture that says, we're doing it right. Everybody else is doing it wrong. Even to the point of like different denominations of Christianity will tell you, yeah, we're the only ones that are doing it right. There's a famous small group of Baptists here in North Carolina who believe that everybody but them is going to hell.
Wow.
There's only, as far as I know, a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand of them, but they live almost like Amish people. Only it's sort of much, much worse. And they literally believe that even other Christians, other denominations of Christianity, everybody but them.
They believe in the proper Christianity.
I used to work with one of these guys, and he said that, yeah, we believe, and this is his words, not mine. He said that, yeah, all those other churches are they're of the same crowd that crucified Christ. In other words, they're all going to hell. Everybody. There's close to what are we, like, close to 8 billion people on the planet now, or 4 billion, or however many it is. It doesn't matter. Billions of people This small group of a few thousand people, the only ones doing it all right. You know, how arrogant is that? Like, just it's crazy. But it all fell apart for me. All of those things when I saw that, the Sumerians had their own creation story that is thousands of years older than what Moses wrote about their creation.
Yeah.
That's where that story came from. The Sumerians passed it on to the Babylonians. Babylonians passed it on to several other different cultures, including what we think of now as the Israelites and their predecessors. It's like a giant game of telephone. Remember that? You're like, I tell him, I whisper something in his ear, and it could literally be just three people. I whisper something in his ear, he whispers it to you. By the time you tell it back to me, it's something completely different from what I said. That's what happened there. I don't think it was malicious. It's just these things got passed down word of mouth. They got passed down through some primitive ways of recording things. And it all got convoluted and messed up. Some of it, I think, was altered deliberately,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
The
But I
winners
think
get to write history.
Yeah, exactly that. The people in power are the ones that get to write those things down and keep the recordings of them. And that's what I was saying about
libraries.
The things that I learned about the history of how the Bible came to be, as we know it today. It's disgusting. Because people who are indoctrinated and raised in it, they don't know any of that. And if you try to tell them, they're just like, that's ridiculous. They think there's no way, that according to them, like, it's all this long, it's this long series of miracle after miracle after miracle where God kept this information pure and exactly how he wanted to be all the way up until today. I mean, never mind that there's, a dozen different translations of it in any given language, and they don't really seem to agree with each other. It's like, you guys not seeing this, like,
same book. Y'all disagree.
Yeah. But, I mean, I'm getting sidetracked here to where it affects me and how it affected me is that, at the same time, all that was going on in my life, my marriage fell apart. It shattered me and my whole family. And I do think that my parents.
So you entered into
that was all happening around the same time too.
So you entered into an idea of agnosticism before you started to get sober?
Oh, I would hesitate to even call it agnosticism. This is full on anti-Christianity.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I honestly, and I've talked with people about this before. I don't talk about it much because I don't like labels. I don't like to put myself within I don't like to use a word to describe myself because then you have your own conception of what that word means, and it places me within parameters and expectations of behavior.
Sure.
So I try very hard not to do that. I don't think of myself as an atheist or an agnostic. Sometimes I say anti-Christian as a joke because I am very much against Christianity. Not the Christians themselves. I think they're very deluded. I think they've been deluded for a long time, and they continue to be deluded. Not Christians as individuals, but Christianity as a whole, as a belief system. I'm very much against that.
Yeah, you have empathy towards folks who might be indoctrinated, and I understand that.
And, as far as God is concerned, and Tony here, we agree on a lot of things, but I'm not an atheist. I believe God absolutely existed. Do you ever see Vin Diesel Chronicles of Riddick?
Yeah.
When he said, I absolutely believe in God and I absolutely hate the fucker. That's how I feel about it. I mean, it's clear to me from everything that I've read that at some point in history, I don't know about today, but at some point in human history, the being that we know of as God existed at some point and had a lot of power. Whether or not he was an alien or some being of light, some celestial, or even just a plain old human, like it's the fucking Wizard of Oz and he's the man behind the curtain. It existed. That being existed, and it enslaved a lot of humanity in this idea of that we have to have religion to save us from ourselves. To me, it's like a spiritual vampire. This thing takes on all of this spiritual energy into itself. Even the Bible tell you that we were created to worship God and to what is it, like a self-perpetuating, this giant being in the sky giving himself a blowjob through all the time. That's what it looks like to me. It's like, why? If you're this ultimate perfect being, why do you need anybody to worship you? And so I really came up with this, started growing me in this concept of God needs us a lot more than we need him. That's why he's so desperate to keep us enslaved in our minds. This is a tyrant. They say that the tyrant's greatest fear is that the people that he oppresses will rise up against him. That's God. When you think about it, and I started reading the Bible with like a critical eye of like, what is this shit really? It reads like fucking Nazi propaganda. God's like Hitler. he really is.
I just want to say
I got all the power.
Not
all. You guys are going to do what I say, or I'm going to kill you. And that's what it is. It's
not all Christians are Nazis, but all Nazis are Christians.
Yeah, everything Hitler did, he was in his own mind, he was doing it all in the name of Christ.
Yeah,
and I'm sorry, but like, look, I'm not trying to hold Christianity today responsible for the actions of Christians throughout history, but at some point, the rest of the world has got to say enough is a fucking enough.
Yeah.
This belief system going all the way back to the origins of the Abrahamic religions, Isaac and Ishmael, going all the way back and even further back. This system of belief is responsible for most of human history, of human misery throughout recorded history. It's responsible for untold billions of murders. Every single war, every single major war in human history it's involved in it.
It is involved in it.
Yeah,
it's on the leading edge. It is what creates it.
You look it up, and even Google will tell you that Christianity is the fastest growing religion on the planet, and they have something like 62% of the world's population identifies as Christian, or not. Sorry, I'm getting my statistics mixed up. 62% of the country. It says they identify as Christian. I think it's a lot of bullshit. I think it's a lot of statistics and numbers crunching that, statistics are where real numbers like go to die, like they just, you can make any number say anything you want. If you're a statistician, I mean, that's what that field of mathematics is all about. It's just making the numbers say what you want them to say to convince somebody of something. But no, Christianity's been saying that as long as I've been alive. I remember hearing that when I was a kid in Sunday school, that Christianity was the fastest growing religion in the world. And I'm like, really? I would venture to guess, and this to me is the biggest mark against Christianity. I would venture to guess that throughout history, even throughout the history of Christianity, most human beings over the last 2,000 years were not Christians. Okay. And to that end, God's threat against everybody who doesn't toe the line and say, when he says, worship me or be destroyed, you do what I say, you worship me, or I'm going to kill you and throw you in a lake of fire, eternal torment and all that. It's a threat against the entire human race, And that to me is like, you know what? No, thanks. When are we going to be done with this shit?
They don't even, half the people come up to me and are like, you understand you're threatening me.
Yeah, it's a threat against. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a group of people who are sitting around waiting for their guy to come back and kill everybody who doesn't agree with them. Mm-hmm. That's what they're praying for every day. And I say, you know what? I can't wait till y'all get raptured. Bring on. I want to help them. Bring on the motherfucking persecution.
I know every day, and it still doesn't come. And then
I wake up, I look outside, it's beautiful. It's like, not today. Damn it. They're still here.
But they don't. That's the thing is so bizarre to me about Christianity is that they don't even know what's in their own book. You know,
I know what's more in their book than most of
the whole concept of Satan. And we're going to talk about higher powers. You know, I'm going to get into this one too. The whole concept of Satan. I mean, in the biblical terms, it's not a person at all. You know, the word Satan just meant devils. You know, it's talking about evil spirits. I get it. Okay, I think they exist, probably in some form or another. You know, you can't have spirituality without spirits. You know, it's just part of it. However, that whole concept, you know, Lucifer, the morning star. Well, that's Jesus.
Yeah,
he even identifies himself as the morning star at the end of Revelation. You know,
I'm telling you.
But the real guy behind all of it, is a character in that mythology called Shamyaza, who was the leader of the Watchers, and the Watchers were the guys who lost the war in heaven and got cast down to earth. It's also the origin of things like the feathered serpent of South American fame, you know, Quetzalcoatl, talked about in Asia as well. The same character. The guy came here to teach us, the Sumerians, Enki or Enkidu, you know, the guy came here to teach us how to get along on our own. That's why, like, all these things that you taught, all these things were forbidden by God to teach us, you know, things like math and reading and writing, metallurgy, lots and lots of different things. And it lists them all in the book of Enoch, which I think is pretty cool. But basically his whole idea was like, look, you guys don't need this guy who keeps telling you, hey, you need me. You're not going to make it without me. You know, you better worship me because you can't do anything without me. You don't need that guy. You can do everything that he can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how God was able to convince everybody that they needed him, because he had all this higher technology. I mean, it's all over the Old Testament. But this guy comes and says, look, I'm going to teach you how to do this shit. That way you don't have to deal with that guy. You can do all this shit on your own, you know? And the next thing you know, he's the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's the bad guy. You know, God's over here killing 500,000 Egyptian babies in one night, you know, but this guy who wants to teach us how to do for ourselves is the bad guy. That's my higher power, Jason. Shamyasa is my higher power. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about worship. I'm talking about an idea embodied in a mythological or historical figure, depending on how you want to look at it.
Sure.
I think it was a real person at some point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would there be so many stories about it? You know? But I'm not talking about religion or worship or anything like that. I'm just talking about a set of ideals and character traits that I admire and want to emulate.
I hear
know?
you. Yeah.
So I have basically a lower, middle, and upper higher power.
Mm-hmm.
The upper higher power to me is just basically reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say basically, you can't really nutshell reality, but all of reality, the whole universe and everything in existence, because you can't get past reality. Not even God could get past reality, you know, because I don't think he created it. He just tried to convince everybody that he did. The middle higher power for me is Shamyaza, because it's like a hero to me, you know. Not an idol, not for worship. I don't believe in worshiping anything.
Or an ideal to aspire to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I aspire to.
Yeah.
And then my lower higher powers are things like my home group, my brothers and sisters in recovery, the recovery community in Charlotte as a whole, you know, although it's hit or miss because some of them are assholes. uh, and some of them I feel like I've come here. Sometimes I feel like, you know what, I think I'm here to teach you, because and that's I like to tell people that, my whole life I didn't fit in, I didn't connect, and that's what a lot of us were missing throughout all of this, is that connection. I didn't connect. I wanted to be a part of all these things so I could tell these people, hey, you're doing that wrong. But I could never connect, and I never felt like I was a part of it. Finally, I found something in recovery where I can walk into a room and say, hey, you're doing that wrong, and somebody else will be like, hey, you're doing that wrong. None of us are doing it right, and we can all tell each other that we're all doing it wrong, and somehow feel good about it. And but to me, that's been a big part of my experience, and I'm making a joke here, but it's been a big part of my experience of recovery. No matter what you're doing, you could be doing everything right or think you're doing everything right. Somebody's still going to walk up and go, hey, you're doing that wrong. Everybody seems to love being able to do that, or feeling like they're in a position of being able to say that. And I'm no different, because I kind of get off on it sometimes too. And then I catch myself and I'm like, man, you're being that guy, but the connection thing, though, that's the really important thing, is that, and no matter how many stories I hear that over and over again, is that lack of connection. It's why people stay in those religions that they're raised and indoctrinated into. It's why people let themselves be indoctrinated in some of these wild cults that we see that pop up from time to time, and I know, and we're old enough that in our lifetimes we've seen enough of them, I'm talking about, like the David Koresh, is a good example. There was
a dude that was an alien. They were going to go and catch an asteroid.
The Heaven's Gate. Heaven's
Gate.
Through the 80s, it was huge.
Okay, so I'm a little too young to have remembered this, but I watched a documentary about it on Netflix. This group called the Moonies.
Oh yeah,
the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Have you seen that documentary on Netflix? I can't remember the name.
I think I have seen it.
His palace is still here.
That guy.
His palace is still here in North America.
It's a pretty awesome docu-series.
Osho said a lot of cool stuff.
He did.
He had some,
but that's how they do that.
I know. He had
That's
some
how
wisdom,
they get you.
right? But then he bailed on them.
Yeah,
that was crazy. That part was, not that it was surprise. It's just, a lot of the ones that we see don't bail, but then end up dying with them because they committed suicide or something. But like with Osho, like he did have he had a hierarchical control over the group.
Yeah.
That I feel like, honestly, he enjoyed but regrets it being, or on some level he may not regret it, but it invalidated a lot of the things that he actually said. I'm not by any means an Osho follower or anything like that, but I have looked at some of the things he said that were there was a lot of misogyny in that cult.
I love I love you. You love me. We're going to build a beautiful community
and have big orgies.
Yeah. Where I was going with that is that,
it's not like too specific, but in general.
Yeah. Well, that's how things like that gather momentum and pick up a following, is that connection, that same lack of connection that leads people into addiction and all kinds of behaviors that harm themselves or the people around them. And that's, to me, I mean, the biggest part of my success in this recovery journey has not been the 12 steps. It's not been this fellowship or that fellowship or the other fellowship. It's been that connection. It's been finally finding people who are Well, part of it's that a lot of these people are just as messed up as me. But the common experiences really clinch it, because we're people who would normally mix, like the literature says, but somehow we all end up having these same sort of experiences in our past, some of it's the abuse, some of it's the trauma, some of it's the neglect, but somehow we all end up finding these ways to identify with each other. And that's how you can pick up a book that was written 80 some years ago and read the first 30 or 40 pages of it and be like, holy shit, that's me. I mean, that's what happened to me when I was, when I was in rehab. I got to rehab and I was still saying, oh, I'm not an alcoholic. I just have a little bit of a drinking problem,
Well, so
people laughed.
That brings to a question that I feel like is really like glaring, is if you had reached that place where anti-Christian, and then you're going into rehab and you're looking at these steps and what they're saying, then on what level were you? There had to be some conflict going on there.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of conflict. I mean that skips over 15 years of drinking and drugging and partying like a rock star. But when I was talking about my marriage falling apart and my beliefs crumbling and all that stuff, all that kind of really set me adrift spiritually. And it's a big part of why I stayed drunk as long as I did, because I couldn't believe that I didn't believe, like I couldn't accept that all of the things that I grew up thinking were true really weren't.
It was a process.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a process. But yeah, when I went to rehab, and the rehab I went to is a faith-based rehab, and I questioned the legitimacy and my own wisdom in even going to something like that. But really, when it came right down to it, the reason I went to that place is because it was free.
Yeah.
I had nowhere to go. And here's 4 months of room and board and treatment that they're willing to hand to you for no cost to you.
And as afterwards, there is help for alcoholics and people in recovery to get back on. No, I don't know there's very few programs that don't immediately throw you out after the process of learning about getting sober. And that's just, I mean, most people that are in recovery have lost connection with their families, so it's a little bit of a rush. And I wish more programs gave people the ability to not just heal, but to make their lives better afterwards. And I'm really glad that the program that you're in, I was in.
I mean, it is a faith-based program and it is Christianity, but that program still is of a lot of benefit to people like me. And they kept saying, I butted heads with, there was a lot of conflict. I had a lot of personal conflict and feeling like I was going against my own beliefs and going through that program, but nobody ever forced me to go against my beliefs. I was very outspoken about what I believed and what I didn't believe when I was there, and it caused some arguments. But they made it clear I had to participate where I had to participate. And I made it clear that I was going to get up and walk out if I felt like I needed to, and I did a few times. They'd make you go to these chapel services, and they had this guy come in and he was also a graduate of that program from years and years back. But fundamentalist Bible thumping, I can't remember if it's Baptist or Pentecostal, but I mean, it doesn't really make any difference in the story. The thing was he would do an altar call every time he was there. And and so he's doing this altar call, and like he's old redneck dude, his beard down to his belly button, and he's, if you ain't man enough for Jesus, you sit right there. I just started laughing because it was so stupid. I'm like, I can't believe I just heard this guy in the same chapel service. He told us that we could not recover. We could not get sober and stay sober without Jesus. And I did get up and walk out on that one because, no.
Were you
I'm
lucky
not
back
doing
in the day they wouldn't let us walk out? And
No, I did walk out. Nobody told me I could.
there was a
so
guy.
I did.
There was a guy that came in to rebound one time, and I was sitting there, and we were in the dining hall, and he was talking about the universe as a whole, and he had a beautiful little girl with him, and I was fully indoctrinated back then. It was early '90s, late '90s, and he came in there and he started talking about how we all come from shit.
Right.
It's where, you know what I'm saying? It's like that, and I'm like, dude, you've got to be out of your mind. I see what you're saying, but like a tree dying is not shit. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just blew my mind what this dude was saying. And I had to sit there and listen to him. I was like, this is ridiculous. I said it out loud, and I mean, it made sense, but it was just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get they've got their own belief system and they feel like they're right about all that shit, but it's like it's counterproductive, to tell people you can't do it without Jesus. I
do it all the time
because
I've been doing it for 14 years.
We've literally seen people. I've seen places and groups where that kind of mentality drives people right out of the rooms and right back onto the streets because they become convinced they can't do it because people are telling them you can't do this unless you do it the way we tell you to. And I think that's why we're here, Tony.
Yeah.
We're here to, in my opinion, to keep a door open in recovery for people like that, to catch those people who slip through the cracks, who are discouraged with the way those traditional meetings go. And I've seen a lot of them,
I mean, I've seen a lot of people pass away. None of my friends, mind you, because I feel the sanity has been restored somewhat, and they don't want it. They realize I can't drink.
Yeah.
I'll walk into rooms and where you hear people like, if I drink, I break out in handcuffs, and they think that's a bragging statement. And I'm like, dude, you're just perpetuating your disease. That whole mentality is going to get you back out there, and then you're going to be worse. Yeah. Because you're going to go to jail.
There's so many people stuck in that mentality. I cringe when I hear that kind of shit. Like, my best thinking is what got me here. Well, no, I did all my stupid shit. All of the bad choices I made when I was drinking. That wasn't my best thinking.
My best thinking got me here.
Yeah, no, I get it. There's two sides to that.
Yeah.
There's two sides to that, but there's this mentality. There's this mentality that you are too maladjusted and too fucked up to get this on your own. I've heard people say, we've heard it in our meeting, like people with these sponsors that, they say, don't you dare open up that book without a sponsor, because you can't understand it. What? You couldn't possibly understand unless you got one of our people to explain it to you. Yeah. Okay. Where did they get that kind of approach to indoctrination, Tony?
I'll say church, man.
Yeah. Because that's what it is, and that's what I keep saying is that a lot of people have turned 12-step recovery into a religion.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to be.
Well, I mean, it's a book study, and there are people, and I love it, because sooner or later, I believe the dam will break. that they'll steal like something that I've said or like I go the big book, I read it, I read it, you understand, and I comprehended what it was saying, and then I put it into perspective. It's like they wrote it so that somebody could get sober by themselves, because there was 100 of them that were trying to get sober, and they were getting inundated from half this country and part of Europe, and they couldn't sponsor all those people.
No.
So they wrote a book and they sent it off to people who got sober by themselves. And that you should see. I'm telling you, I mean, the other day, some dudes like, it doesn't say I, it says we. And I go, they're talking about their experience. They're not talking about me and you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
misinterpreted.
Exactly.
It's not that big a misinterpretation, but still what is being said is how they got sober.
Yeah. Well, they want to treat it like it's the Bible.
I know.
You know?
They hypnotize themselves. I used to do it. Self-hypnotize, hypnotize. I walk into rooms and you can, I don't know if feel it's the right word, but you sense it, you can see, because they're doing the repetitive motions, and they've hypnotized themselves into a state, and they think that is sobriety. And I'm like, no, you're just gone off the rails.
Indoctrinated.
Yeah.
No, I really think that we're seeing like the beginnings of, and this is going to sound so corny, but it's like a spiritual revolution in recovery, in those 12-step programs, of people who are seeing the reality versus the indoctrinated religion involved. And they're saying that it doesn't have to be that way. I've said it over and over and over again. That's the beauty of these programs, is that they're so simple. You can do it. You can do it with God.
Yeah, you can.
And you can do it without God. It's like what our guy says, like, if you have a God, that's great. If you don't have a God, don't drink over it.
Yeah. I mean, that was the whole they taught me, and they didn't realize what they were saying. It's like when I first came, it's like, if you're angry at God, just go on with the steps. If you're in love with God, just go on steps. If you're mad at God, just go on with the steps. And then I was like, and if you don't believe in God, just go on with the steps.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. And what does each of these things tell me to do, devoid of that religious stuff? What does each step tell me? First, I have to admit that I have a problem, and I have to be willing to try another way. Now, how do I demonstrate that? I admit that I have a problem. And by admitting that I have a problem, because I am so stubborn, when I was out, I didn't think I had a problem. I am doing that second part, because I'm trying another way. I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong. Even when I'm right, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong, because I'm trying to break the mental obsession, the physical compulsion. And so, like, even when I'm right, and then I know something, and I'm even arguing with someone, like, even when I'm right, I'm like, I might be wrong on this, even though there's no way around it. Sometimes that's just the way it is. It helps me find peace, man. It really does. And I don't even know how to thank the founders of this. I don't think they would have appreciated what I'm saying half the time. But, they didn't appreciate, like, one of the founders and what he did half the time. So,
I was just thinking about that very same thing. There's a lot of disagreement in a lot of that, and that guy had some ideas that the rest of his people really didn't like, and they didn't want to hear anybody hear about it, and that bothers them. Like, anytime you start suppressing an idea, that's when my ears perk up.
Yeah,
like, okay, maybe we need to listen to that, or I at the very least want to hear what the guy's got to say, since you're all trying to shut him up.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it might be insanity, but sometimes it might be the truth. And I'm usually most of the time it's not.
I mean,
but like
there's
again,
science that backs some of it up, though.
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind is years after that guy was gone, you know, some of the things that he was promoting, science has found that there's a lot of benefit.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, psychedelic mushrooms is a perfect example. And I'm not saying go out and eat a bunch of mushrooms. I have, but not for a long time. Certainly not since I got sober. But the medical research shows that there can be a lot of benefit to be gained from that. Enough to where that I think people should keep an open mind about things like that. I mean, you've got and I'm not promoting anything here. I'm not promoting drug use. I'm not promoting marijuana or psychedelic mushrooms, but there are people who see a lot of benefit in marijuana maintenance. You know, I kind of feel like, okay, yeah, these programs are total abstinence, and that's fine. You know, for my own perspective, sobriety isn't the goal here. You know, that's what people get. It's not sobriety that's the goal. It's me not being a piece of shit and hurting myself and everyone else around me. That's the goal. Sobriety is just a means to an end in that regard. So, I say, whatever, it's not so much whatever keeps you sober, it's whatever keeps you from hurting yourself. Whatever keeps you out of that spiral of destruction, where all you're doing is hurting yourself and everyone around you. And for a lot of people, that's in addiction. But whatever keeps you from not doing that and keeps you on a path of being a benefit to yourself and everyone around you, being a contributing member of society, whatever keeps you on that path, I'm all for it, and I think people are locked into this idea that it's the same thing for everybody. And that's where I say, you're talking about religion, it's not a religion. It's not a religious program. It's a spiritual program. To me, the word spiritual program is like the definition of religion. It's a program of spirituality. That's a religion. I mean, this is
well, my point being, and I'm going to go to my point is like, I've helped people that are confused, suffering from a mental illness, get sober and realize that they're not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And so they go and live their own life.
Mm-hmm.
And I want that for them. If they're not an alcoholic, I want that for them. If they can smoke weed, have at it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like for me, the part of it being that a part of my sanity is being sober. And I just don't want to give that up.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm not promoting any
I'm just talking about me
or anything like that. But yeah, no, I'm with you on that because, like, I've told people over and over again, my closest friends, and I'll say it here. I identify as an alcoholic, because of the things that I read in the definitions, not only in the literature but in medical science. By definition, I could be classified as an alcoholic. I identify as an alcoholic. I introduce myself. Hi, my name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic. But I'm not always convinced that I'm an alcoholic. There's enough questionability in the human. Yeah, there's enough question. There's enough question to me that sometimes I think to myself, I might not be an alcoholic. I may come to discover someday that I had a lot of other mental health problems. I still do. And that manifested itself in severe alcohol dependency. And that's not the same thing. Even medical science will tell you that's not the same thing. So I question it. However, in the interests of my own self-preservation and continuing on the forward, upward, positive path that I've been on for the last year and a half, I operate under the assumption that I am a full-blown alcoholic. Because if I don't, I get that notion in my head that I can go back out there and drink like a normal person. And I know exactly what will happen if I do that. It's not going to be good. So I operate under that assumption that, okay, yeah, with all in all likelihood, I'm probably an alcoholic, so I'm going to keep on that path, because it's working, for a year and a half. I mean, I can't even, like, I look at it and I'm just like, my entire adult life from the time I was about 19, there had never been more than, say, a 24-hour period in 20, almost 25 years. There were more than like 24 hours where I wasn't on something, where I wasn't either high or drunk or both or coked out of my head, what have you. I mean, I did all kinds of different drugs, and I didn't do all of them, but most of them, never more than a 24-hour period without anything like that, up until 2 years ago, when I went to detox for the first time, and that, to me, it blows my mind, and I could really tear myself apart dwelling on all the wasted time and the wasted money and all the things like that. But what I have now, I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Yeah, sometimes I wish I had done this a lot sooner. I wish I'd done this years ago. But I'm here now, and I'm not going back to that. Because I found the answer to a lot of my mental and emotional health challenges in this process. I'm not saying I'm cured. I still struggle with depression. I still struggle with the suicidal ideation and the anxiety, but the severity is like probably less than a tenth of what it was 2 years ago. And that, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's a miracle. I don't even know what that word means anymore. But it is the essence.
I still say Jesus Christ.
Well, it's,
you know what I'm saying?
It's
Jesus Christ.
It's the essence of my spiritual experience, of my spiritual awakening.
Fortuitous is one of the
I
things.
became who I am now, through all of that. In some cases, despite some things, in some cases, because of some things.
I looked up what the definition for miracle was. And then I started looking up for advantageous, fortunate, blessed, honored. You know what I'm saying? And I was using one word to express multiple definitions.
I try to avoid any words that go back to giving God the credit for something that I and other people did.
It's part of my upbringing.
Blessed is a word that I avoid entirely, because to me that's like saying God did this for me, and no, I'm sorry, but God did not do this. I'm not saying I did it on my own, but God certainly didn't do that. God doesn't keep me sober.
We stand on the shoulders of giants, sir.
Well, okay, so this morning, a meeting I was in, we were talking about complacency, and this is a thought I've had about complacency all summer, going back to talking to another friend of ours, and I'm not going to mention his name, but we talk a lot about, and it was even in the daily reflection today, I was talking about how easy it is to sit back and rest on our laurels, right? That complacency, that arrogance that says, I got this. I don't need to keep up on my spiritual maintenance. I got this, But here's the thing. No matter who you are in the circles that we travel in, and the people that we hang with, no matter who you are, no matter what your higher power is, I didn't get here by myself. Whether your higher power is God or a group of drunks or a fucking rusty doorknob, it doesn't matter. You didn't get here by yourself. You didn't do it by yourself. So if you're sitting back and resting on your laurels, whose laurels are they really? Complacency is I forget the exact definition, but it talks about looking at yourself with an uncritical eye, you know, or an uncritical view of one's self and one's achievements. Those achievements aren't mine alone. You know, I didn't come this far just because of me. I came this far because of people that care about me, people who support me, people who are doing it with me, people who did it before me. You know,
those are
all of those things
that I'm talking about.
That's who the achievements and the laurels belong to. So, you know, when that's what helps me to not do that, to not get complacent, is that knowledge and that realization that those aren't my laurels to rest on, you know. Just a thought that I have when it comes to things like that.
Well, again, it's like with one of the founders, he suffered from mental illness for like the first 15, 16 years of his sobriety, going in and out of hospitals, taking medication. And that brings me comfort because that was 16 years of sobriety while he was still doing it. Might have been 25 years. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember off the top of my, but he suffered from mental illness for most of his life. And then finally, to my understanding, was freed from it. Supposedly, I don't know if that's ever possible, but he stopped going to hospitals as much, I guess, you know. He had his own little cabin in the back of his house where, you know, his wife would send him so that he could go hang out and do like writings. And he wrote
there's that connection again, though.
Yeah.
You know, you see a lot in that person.
Yeah.
Because that person says to you, Tony, you're not alone.
Yeah. Even though we never met.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's what it says to you. And it's like amazing to me the effect it can have on somebody when you just say, hey, man, you're not alone. You know, I mean, not just to just say that to people to affect them in some kind of way, but just to let somebody know that, you know what, you might feel like you're alone, but you're not. You're not the only one that's gone through this. You're not the only one going through it now. And we're here, you know, we're here for you. You're not alone. People need to know that, you know, it's a wonderful thing to know that and to feel like you're not alone in what you're going through, even if that person is just sitting there next to you in silence while you go through what you're going through, you know, whether it's, you know, physically or, you know, metaphorically.
So I don't know what can be more spiritual than a man that I've never met talk about mental illness, not even really talk about it, learn about him suffering from mental illness after he wrote, you know, the big book with 100 other people. He suffered from it, and then it let me know that it was okay, and that I needed to try and do the best I could with what I had, confronted with the world as it is. That's all I can do is try to do the best that I can. And understanding there are a lot of people that aren't here to have that mindset, that are just here for a paycheck or just been, you know, mishmashing through life, and they've been put into a place where they're able to help people but don't realize. Yeah, I mean, so I just think there's nothing. That's one of the most spiritual things you can do. And that's what spirituality is actually talking about, that connection between the two, that, I guess, space that exists that doesn't exist. Yeah.
Well, you know? I mean, I kind of look at it in like the most basic terms that I can explain to myself and understand it, and and for other people to understand it as well. Okay. So, you know, I'm going to say right off the bat to preface this, I believe in a human soul. Okay. We have this body that's basically like a meat vehicle, you know. Somebody called it a meat Gundam. You know Gundams are like anime. Okay, yeah. So your meat Gundam, you know, your soul is the pilot. That's essentially you. you know, not your body, but and not your brain even, but what's inside of that? What's, you know, what's behind those beautiful blue eyes of Tony's, you know.
Stop hitting them.
But that's the soul. Okay. And you're talking about a connection between people who've never physically met, separated by decades, through space and time. That is another side of reality that we don't see with, and we don't feel and touch or taste or hear with our physical senses. That's a spiritual dimension, if you will. So we have a soul that resides in our physical body, but the soul also resides within the spirit, our spiritual entity, which is basically like a body in the spiritual dimension. It's the other vehicle that our soul inhabits. And that's how we connect with people in a spiritual way across time. You know, you read a book that's decades or even hundreds of years old and feel like you were there and you're connected to that place and time or those people. That's all happening within the spiritual realm. When you meet a person and you say, you know what, something about this guy just isn't right. I don't like the vibe. You know, I don't trust this. You don't even know it, but you instantly don't trust him. And you just sense intuitively that something about this guy is evil. That's all happening within that spiritual dimension. That's another dimension of spirituality. I mean, and I feel like, you know, and I'm not saying I'm the fittest guy here, you know, because I'm certainly not. But, you know, the literature talks about spiritual fitness. That's what it's talking about. It's getting that spiritual body in shape. And you notice, like, the more fit you are spiritually, the more perceptive you are about things like that. The more perceptive you are about people who are hurting, people who are experiencing joy and sorrow, and people who can't be trusted, people who seem on the outside to be normal and pleasant, but you just know they're very, very, very dangerous. Those are all aspects of being sensitive to spiritual things, you know. And there's a lot of ways you can word it. That's just my perspective on it, you know.
Well, my thing is like, I don't believe in like demons or, you know, evil forces. These are archaic. They are words that are outdated, I feel, half the time. You know, you tell him, buddy. He's telling us to be quiet. What's up with your boy?
Somebody's walking their dog.
Well, I mean, we can call it quits now, man.
He's
because we've been doing this for a while.
He's protecting the house.
It's 7 o'clock.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I'll say some stuff to finish up.
I dare you. I dare you to say something.
Well,
Leon's got something to say.
Yeah, he does.
Good luck.
Tell us all about it.
Let's hear it, Jason.
Well, no, I'm grateful that you guys are here, and I'm happy that you finally figured out that, you know, you're both saved again, Christians, and now you can start doing the Lord's work.
We're bloodthirsty cannibals.
Right. That's right. Start voting Republican immediately. Yeah, no, I had to use the bathroom, and I knew that he needed to go for a walk.
I'm not worried about it.
So I had to bail on that. But
well, since the
I'm
main
sure you guys had some like excellent content. I didn't mean to walk away from.
No, I understand.
But do you want to? Because this was about, you know.
It's all about me.
Well, yeah, it actually was, so you could speak about your spiritual.
No.
I mean, I got the main point.
No.
Okay.
No. It started off about him, but it was more about us. So that's the only thing is for me is, do you have anything that you'd like to say or add? And both of you.
Do you want me to go first? Or you want to go first?
I just want to say, you know, we talk a lot about some really heavy things here, but I just want to make it clear, I don't hate Christians. You know, I really don't. A lot of my close friends and brothers and sisters in recovery are Christians, and I don't want to come across like I secretly despise all these people because of their beliefs. I don't. I love those people very, very much. I just think they're incorrect. They think I'm incorrect. You know, my main thing is like, unlike a lot of people, I'm not going to ostracize those people or treat them like they're pieces of shit just because they believe differently from what I believe. They don't see what I see. You know, part of my purpose is, you know, in becoming a better person than I've ever been is to help people understand the lies that are inherent in those belief systems.
I'm gonna just take the opposite of that. I don't like people that find the ability to excuse their behavior and something that doesn't exist, so they continue to act out and treat people. So I don't like them. But I don't. I mean, there are some of them that I love and care about, and they're trying to, you know, make their mommies and daddies happy and their family. But I just to excuse immoral behavior over and over and over and over and over and over again. I'm not perfect, but I'm not out there robbing and shooting and hurting people and then, you know, letting them back. You know, if somebody starts hurting a lot of people around me, they're not going to be hanging out with me. They're not going to be hanging out with me. So, but I will meet with them in the communal grounds of society, but I'm not going to be hanging out with them if they're going to continue to hurt people and find an excuse to hurt people. I watched too many videos of people who have been hurt in the church by somebody in the church, and then the person that hurt that person in the church was the one that they surrounded with them, and they loved and they cared about them, and they left the victim to suffer. And I've seen it too many times when, you know, and I'm not in the Satanist, but to my understanding, like the Satanists, if you do that, they put you out. They don't let you go. They don't let you hang out. So, but still, I feel like a lot of times it's the fact that it's an offshoot, and sometimes it's making fun of. And so, I don't know. It could be very complicated. But I'm too happy, man. I'm too happy for that. I don't want it. I'm too happy for that. So, yeah, I will stop with that. And one day, maybe we'll get you there.
I'll say that for me, I see both of your points, and for me, has a lot to do with what's in recovery literature. It talks about love and tolerance as our code, and but that's not the only statement. Also, in our literature, when it comes to dealing with others and building relationships. And so for me, I practice having boundaries. And so I don't hate, and I actively practice not hating people that I dislike strongly, in the way that when it comes to tolerance, I don't know who said it, but it has to do with, and I might butcher it horribly, but it has to do with, you know, the concept of tolerance is great until you're dealing with somebody who's intolerant. And so what in a social system, the tolerant will allow the intolerant to take over and burn the whole thing down. And before you know it, you're in the midst of large groups of intolerance. And so from those examples in history, there gets to be a thing where I don't need you to feel comfortable telling me I need to believe something, that I need to be believing the way that you believe. And when you start to do that, I get to put my boundary up. And if you, in other words, no, I don't, and I refuse, and that is my choice. And if you continue along this path with needing me to believe the way that you believe, no matter how you cover it, eventually I'll need to not have anything to do with you because you're being intolerant, period. And I don't have to put up with intolerance. I don't. And so we talked about it earlier. It has to do with, gradients of crimes and, those things. I get to put up those boundaries and say, people get upset when I go to meetings that aren't like my home group, right? And they get upset because I share that I'm, atheist agnostic. I don't ascribe to the tenets of needing to have God in every freaking corner of my home, watching me take my fucking underwear off. You know what I mean? What? Watching me take his shit.
Right.
No. I don't need that. I don't need it. And there are so many other available options to get the tools to help me along that explain things in a way that I don't need a historically mystic person doing things or not. That doesn't benefit me in the least. It actually leaves a place for me to be able to pretend in ways, to escape in ways, and not address what the hell I need to be doing, or what the hell, how am I supposed to connect with somebody with that sort of ambiguous format, that ambiguous way of being and doing things. I can hide a whole bunch of lies in the back of that. So I choose to be in a more transparent state. And so when it comes to that, I look at the numbers, I look at the numbers. And I've shared it in my group is, look, there's 3,000 plus meetings where you can sit and have a conversation and talk to everybody in the group about God. All you want to. They're all over the place, and I'm not saying you're not welcome here at this meeting. However, there are boundaries in this meeting that say that there is autonomy. And with that autonomy, you can share how you want, for sure. However, if you start to push your indoctrination of your belief onto others, you're being intolerant of this one singular meeting in a group, in a sea of meetings that you can go talk about God all you want to. So being the minority and the victim aren't accurate in that scenario for you. And that it has to do with, a respect And like I've got family members that I love deeply that are Christian, religious, people.
You want to say Republican? Go ahead.
Some of them I can't continue a relationship with because they refuse to respect me and how I operate in this world and how I choose to help people versus how they choose to help people. And there's just nothing I can do about that. Every time I get around them, they see me in a certain way, and it is a literal, I feel like a screen, and they're the projector, and it's like they're putting the character that they see as me on me. And I can't avoid it. I'm just sitting there going, you really see me like that, and I can't ascribe to it. I can't, that is not me. And no matter what I do and say, you're not going to believe me. I've tried it over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
And I get the same results from it. I am this to you. And I can't. So anything that comes out of my mouth isn't reflective of honesty, transparency, none of that stuff. And there's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't matter how many freaking, I could go out here and, save 100 kids from drowning and like, feed thousands of homeless people. I could do all kinds of stuff like that. And it would not change how these people see me. I could be put in headline news, like saved a freaking busload of kids. It's not going to matter. He did this, and he never really got it this way, and blah, blah. I ain't got time for that shit. Ain't nobody got time for that shit.
Local
and that's
devil
it,
worshiper.
man.
What's your shirt say?
Human
Can they
sacrifice
see
at
what your
11.
shirt is?
Yeah.
It says looks like I picked the wrong week to stop sniffing glue. Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what's his name from Airplane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your shirt?
Oh, it's Jesus on a Velociraptor.
Jesus on a Velociraptor. What's my shirt say?
Show me your kitties.
Show me your kitties.
All right, man. I'm gonna